So I edit it. You don't get everything on my YouTube page. That'd be too long and boring. All right, so for some reason, people have problems with this section, government rights in the land. It should be relatively easy after I teach it to you, right? All right, so police power, zoning and planning. So how I remember police power, zoning and planning is I go police power planning. Then what you do is you circle the P in police, the P in power, and the P in planning, and you remember police power planning, zoning and planning. Next one's kind of long. Promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. So again, you got the P's. Police power promotes public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. I kind of warned you about the next one that's coming in right when we started class. I said, if you see this word, take the answer. Nothing else on the test says grandfathered in. Police power, legal non-conforming use is grandfathered in. After you guys are done writing, I'll explain it to you. So, zoning can change. Most of the time, if it's residential, it's 1 to 4. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's R1, which means you can only have 1 unit on it. However, ADUs are cool, right? Just saying. Anyway, so this guy on the test, he has a house and it's in a normal area, and the city decides to change it from R1 to 4, because sometimes it's R1 to 4, so you can have as many as up to 4 units on it. And the city's like, well, you know, so many people have units on there and it's kind of getting a little crowded, so let's change it from R4 to R1. Well, the guy already has a house in the front and 2 units in the back, so he's got 3 units on there. And it says, what's he gonna do? The city just changed the zoning. Well, he already did it and he already has permits. So just because they change it now doesn't mean he has to go back and tear it down, because it's grandfathered in. Mm-hmm. So if it was already permitted, it was already done, and they changed the zoning, and it's grandfathered in. It's the only answer on the test that says grandfathered in. I think it's C, and it's kind of over there. You see grandfather, take the answer. Escheat. This is when you get cheated by the state, right? Here goes, escheat. Assets reversed to the state. You thought I was kidding, huh? I'm serious. You get cheated by the state. So escheat can be real property. It can be money in a bank account. It could be money in escrow. Crazy, right? So if you have something that, like if somebody dies and they can't find the heirs, it can escheat to the state. And it only has to be a year. So like I had money, so when I got divorced from my son's dad, we had a bank account. It had a whole whopping 20 bucks in it, okay? And I get this letter from, it was a credit union. I get the letter from the credit union. It says, you need to contact us to get the money out of the bank because there's like no activity for a year. And so I'm like, okay, so how much is it? She's like 20 bucks. I'm like, whatever. I put 20 more bucks in there just for fun. Anyway, but you have to be careful because sometimes, it doesn't happen a lot. It only happened to me once. I had an investor that was flipping. So I would find the house, my son would fix it, I would sell the house, the investor would make the money, I got my commission, my son got paid. Isn't that cool? We had a cute little thing going on. So she had a house in Westchester. Westchester's an awesome place. And we made it. He took it down to studs and redid it, and everything was great. And on the plans, it said that there was a planter in the front. Well, in Westchester, you have to have a planter because of the way the water moves. And so at the end, she's like, you know, I don't think I'm going to make very much money. I'm not going to do the planter. That's like another $10,000. So I'm just not going to do it. And then when we sell it, we'll make the buyer do it. I'm like, whatever. And so she really thought she was going to lose money. But then right before I listed it, I called her. I go, check this out. There was a bidding war on this one house, and they sold it for 1.7. Well, she bought hers for like $935 and put $200,000 into it. I go, I think you're going to make way more than you think you're going to make. And she's like, I still want to do the planner. I'm like, okay. So we sell it right away. Now, you guys, that was one of the easiest ones because the real estate agent for the buyer he would communicate. He called me, like the first thing he did was he called me, he's like, what's it gonna take for my buyer to get the house? I go, well, it's listed at 1.7, so a minimum of 1.7. He's like, why don't I go 1.720? Go for it, let's do it. And so we did it, and he's like, he was from a different area, so he didn't know there had to be a planner there, but we had to get the final. So one of the other things, you guys, if the house is torn down to the studs, you don't have to get an occupancy certificate because that's only for new builds. So all we had to do is get the final permit, but we couldn't get the final permit without the stupid planner. And so she wanted to sell and she wanted her money, and I wanted my commission, and so did he. And the buyer wanted to move in, so everybody wanted to get it going, but we didn't want to wait for the stupid planner. So what we did was we put the money into escrow until she finished the planner. Well, the buyer's agent didn't know how much it was going to be, and I said, well, you know what? She's making like $400,000. Let's just put 40 grand in escrow. So we put 40 grand in escrow, and then she had a baby, and things happened, and she just kind of forgot about the 40 grand. A year goes by, and I get a call from escrow, and escrow goes, you know, Cindy's money is still in escrow, and it's almost a year. And my first thought was, I said to the escrow girl, I go, it's cheap. And she goes, absolutely. She goes, if she doesn't get something done, like in the next couple of weeks, it's cheap to the state, 40 grand. Jeez. So it can be property, it can be escrow money, it can be money in a bank account. If there's no activity in a year, the state can take it. And when I said that you're cheated by the state, you thought I was kidding, huh? It's cheat.
But it can't be,
you won't forget that, will you?
It can't be personal property, right?
Well, personal property you take with you and you move around with you.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be personal property. Subdivision Map Act. So these are subdivisions. Cities and counties. This one's super simple. It's a big, long question, but the answer is city. The literal answer is cities and counties. So as soon as you see cities and counties together, that's the only place it's on the test like that. You guys all got that? Planning Commission. That's another thing you guys want to do as real estate agents, is get involved in your city or your county. And if you ever thought you wanted to run for office, being a real estate agent, you can get the backing of the boards. It's a very, you guys, real estate agents are very political. A lot of people don't know that. There's actually a party called the Realtor Party. And it's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's the Realtor Party. Planning Commission does not regulate ordinances. So they'll say the Planning Commission does all these things, but doesn't do this. And they make ordinances, but they don't regulate them. And every city has a master plan, believe it or not. And the master plan has to be reviewed every 20 years, and they review it to make sure that the city is staying up to date and that everybody that's living there has everything they need. And to get on the planning committee for the master plan, they do that about every 20 years. It's something that you might want to do. I live in Diamond Bar, and Diamond Bar was doing their master plan. And by the way, if you do get involved with that, it's a 5-year commitment. I can't even make a 1-year commitment, let alone a 5-year commitment. Planning, zoning, districts, streets, seismic. I would actually add in there futuristic. Add the word futuristic. Because when you see that, you'll see planning, zoning, and then that futuristic will probably pop out like a sore thumb. All good? Couple pins still going. Before burning trash. You know you can't go in your backyard and burn trash. It pollutes the air. You need to go to the local air district and ask for permission. Hi, can I burn trash in my backyard? I don't know, just a thought. What can I put in that fire pit? Local building codes, minimum standards. So the reason we have building codes is a lot of you guys are pretty young. However, I mean, some of you probably drive down streets in communities where they're older communities and you look at a property and it looks like they just took like a cardboard box and put it on top of the garage. Have you ever seen those where the house used to be a single level and the driveway goes like this into the garage and then the garage looks like they plopped another house on top of it? You can always tell when somebody does a really crappy room addition. It's kind of sad, but a lot of times the problem is they're not to code. And when a house has a bunch of things that aren't to code, it usually not only looks bad, but it could be dangerous. So that's why they have local building codes, to make sure that the property is done with minimum standards. Conflict between codes. So city has a code and the county has a code, or maybe the county has a code and the community has a code. Which one's going to win? The higher standards. Subdivision land laws. This is something you'll use all the time in the real world of real estate. 5 lots or more. So you guys know, because I told you, residential is 1 to 4. If someone's building on 5 lots or more, subdivision land laws. Deed restrictions are private restrictions set by the developer or grantor. Oh, I got a good story for you guys. I'm going to write a book called Crazy Real Estate Stories. Yes?
Real quick, the 5 lots more, that's like an apartment, right?
No, it's like a builder building 200 houses.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Subdivision is where the builder's building houses. But if they're going to do 5 or more, that's that. So, this is my favorite story. So, I have a couple of real estate agents under me. Every so often I bring somebody under me, and I have this one guy, he flips houses, so he's a really good real estate agent. But he does it only just like sometimes. So anyway, he has a buyer. Buyer's name was Blake. So, and I can't forget Blake's name because his name was Blake Rad. How could you forget that? Rad. Anyway. So Blake wanted a single family home. We pre-qualified him for his loan. He's ready to go. And when we pre-qualified him, he said he's absolutely not buying anything that has an association. And so he goes looking somewhere in South County, and he finds this property. There's no guarded gate. There's no park. There's no swimming pool. There's nothing. And they drive up to it, and it looks and smells and kind of seems like a single family home. So the real estate agent, you know, of course, he looks on the listing because that's what he did to show them the houses in the first place. And on the listing, it says SFR, single family residence. Okay, you guys have to know what you're selling. Okay, it's a single family residence. So everything's going fine. We put the offer in and we're in escrow. Once you go into escrow, what will happen is you'll give the escrow officer your purchase contract, and she'll send out the escrow instructions, and then eventually she orders the preliminary title, and you're going to review the title, and we get the title report. And the first thing that happens is, guess what? It's not a single family residence. It's a condo.
Oh.
So David calls me. David's the real estate agent. He calls me. He's like, Sharon. And I go, yeah. He goes, got a problem. He goes, do you think Blake will qualify for an association fee? I said, you know, when I tell you how much a house is worth or how much the buyer can buy, he could buy this and it was tight. I'm not going to tell you, oh, he can buy $450 when he can buy $525. I'm going to tell you he can buy $525. So he's like, well, I know, but there's an association fee. I go, well, why? And he said, it's a condo. I said, didn't it say it was a single family residence on the listing? Yeah. I'm like, do you want me to call the broker? He goes, well, what are you going to do? I go, I'm going to call her and talk to her, see what's up. Why did she list a condo as a single family residence? So I call her and I say, hi, you never want to hear these lines. Hi, this is Sharon Butler, if you're the listing agent. And I'm not the buyer's agent. And she goes, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Aren't you David's broker? I'm like, yeah. She goes, wow, the broker doesn't usually get involved in anything. She's like, how can I help you? And I said, well, you know, I think we might have a little problem. And she says, what's that? And I said, well, on the listing, it says single family residence. Anywhere does it say it's a condo. And we just found out it's a condo. And she goes, no, it's a single family residence. And I go, no, it's a condo. I go, what makes you think it's a single family residence? Are you guys ready? She says, because on the fire insurance policy, it says it's a single family residence. And I said, well, on the preliminary title report, it says it's a condo. She goes, well, no, it's a single family. And I said, well, this is my favorite line ever. You guys can use it anytime you want. if we go to a court of law, I think the person that is going to win is the one that says it on the preliminary title report, not on the fire insurance. And she's like, well, you don't have to go that far. And I'm like, well, actually we do, because we're in escrow now, and we're in escrow based on you did misrepresentation. She's like, well, I've been on the board of realtors and not. She's like, I've been doing this for 30 years. And I felt like saying, well, then you need to learn what you're doing. You guys, that's how bad it is out there. I mean, a person that had been in the business for 30 years, she went on to say she was a CAR director. And I said, so am I. And I said, well, we could either take care of it that way or you can fix this. And she goes, well, what are you suggesting? I go, well, you guys have to realize when your clients buy something that's in a condo complex, the interest rate's higher. Not only is the interest rate higher, but the association fee was $425 a month. And I said, that makes him almost not qualify. So your client needs to buy down the interest rate so he qualifies. And by the way, to be really nice, you need to pay for the HOA for the next 2 years. So what we got is we actually got her client to pay for it 1% to buy down the interest rate so he qualified, and the seller paid for 1 year of HOAs. So it's all about negotiating. But you have to know what you're selling. And the reason I told you that story is because the developer is the one who gets to pick if it's a condo, a townhouse, a PUD, or a single family resident. It's up to the developer to pick what it is. And that's what it's going to say on the preliminary title report. Whatever the developer says. So it could look like a house, it could look like a condo, it could be whatever, but whatever he puts on there is what it is. And legally a townhome is just a name that developers came up with so that condo, because see, if you advertise condo, people are going to think it's like the things where they're stacked like apartments. Okay, but they said townhome when they market it. So usually when you get a townhome, when you look at the legal description, it will probably say that it's a condo or a town or a planned unit development. It won't say townhouse. Okay, so be aware of what you're selling. Violating a condition. Penalties are more severe. So if you go against your HOA, believe it or not, the HOA could actually sue you and get your property from you. So you don't want to mess with HOAs, okay? One of the things that HOAs have control over, most of the time, I'd say almost all the time, but you don't want to always say always, but they have control over your front yard. If you don't get your front yard looking in good condition, they can come and put a violation on your door. You don't want to mess with HOAs. Most restrictive restriction. Oh, this is a really tough one, so I really want you guys to pay attention, all right? Here goes. Most restrictive restriction restricts. What you guys laughing at? So when they say the most restrictive restriction restricts, basically the story is about a property in San Diego County. And in San Diego County, they have a certain amount of square footage the lot has to be. But in the community, it has a larger one. Which one are we going to go with? Well, it's going to go with the community one because the community has a higher restriction, or whichever one on the test. We'll see the question. So if the city says every lot has to be an acre, however, the community says it all has to be 1 acre plus a little bit more, the little bit more is going to win because a larger size is less beneficial to the developer because he can build less homes. Quiet enjoyment. I like this one, it's funny. Quiet enjoyment doesn't mean it needs to be quiet. Quiet enjoyment, I can't talk. Quiet enjoyment has to do with landlord-tenant relationships. Possession, paramount title. So what that means is the tenant has the right to possession because they're paying for rent. But the landlord still has paramount title because they own it. Okay? So if you're a landlord, you can't just go to your tenant's place and walk in anytime you want. They have the right to quiet enjoyment. They're paying you to leave them alone, basically. It was interesting. I had a listing a couple years ago in January, and she was the coolest landlord, but she was crazy. When I met her at the house, she had the keys to their homes, and she just walked in, and I'm like, that's against the law, right? And man, were those tenants glad to know she was selling. We got there, and she just opens the dude's door and walks in. I'm like, what if he's taking a shower? She's like, it's okay. She walks in, she's like, hey, I'm here. You can't do that, okay? Scary. He was in the shower when we got there. She's like, you knew we were coming. Give public report. So subdividers have these public reports. I never really knew about them. I mean, I didn't even pay attention to them until I started teaching this class. The public report can be given to anyone at any time. So what happens is when a developer starts building a subdivision, they have to do a public report. What the public report is for is to make sure that they're not just taking deposits from a bunch of people and then bailing with the money. It's to protect the buyers, okay? The public report. Now, anybody can get a copy of it at any time. So if you sent in a 10-year-old kid into a sales office and said, you have a public report, they have to give it to them. Anyone, anytime. Public report does not include a reasonable value. This is the one that confused me. So after you write does not include reasonable value, circle reasonable value because you need to know that. And I'll explain it to you. Because this is kind of a crazy question. So when we get to the question, on the questions and answers, I'll point it out. So the public report is there to give the buyer a bunch of information, but it's not there to give the buyer what's a fair price for the property. It's not an appraisal. It's not a comparable. It's not going to compare the properties in the area. It's just to make sure that the developer doesn't defraud the buyer. So it has nothing to do with the value. So when you're building subdivisions, if you're working with somebody who buys vacant land and they're going to build a bunch of homes, so a subdivider, building residential subdivisions, the first thing you're going to do is acquire the property. It's going to ask you what's the steps, and you have to know it's acquisition, approval by the city, and then development. So A is in apple, A always comes first, right? So acquisition, approval, then development. And believe it or not, the commissioner, the real estate commissioner, has to review all public reports and approve them. Now, let's say he approved one and then he finds out later, well, you know, I need to stop this thing for a minute. He's going to rescind the approval of the subdivision. He's going to issue a desist and refrain order. Everybody good? Gets a negative declaration. Well, they always want positive stuff. You don't want something that's negative, right? However, on this particular situation, you want a negative declaration. So what happens whenever a builder buys a piece of land? Hopefully they check it out before they actually buy it. I did that with one of my students from one of my real estate classes, lives in Fresno, and he was trying to find property to build his parents a truck stop. And that was a long, drawn out thing because it's like every time we found a piece of land, then we'd have to see if we could build it. We'd have to go to the city, and then we'd have to actually do like a public hearing where people from the area could come in and give us their opinion. And then we had to get the city's approval. It's a long, drawn out process. So one of these things is when you're getting a negative declaration, that's what you want. You want a negative declaration because you're seeing if you're going to have harm to the community. So if it's negative, it's not going to have harm to the community. So a good example of that is before I had my real estate license, back in the early days, I was a receptionist and I worked for architects and engineers, and we built bridges. If you guys know the 91 freeway, one of the bridges we did was the Gypsum Canyon Bridge. And so when we were doing Gypsum Canyon, it was a real pain in the butt because we got a positive environmental problem. And the positive one was, believe it or not, there was a little birdie that was an endangered species. So every time the little endangered species showed up, all building had to stop. So what they'll literally do is they'll watch for if that particular animal shows up, and that happens all the time. They have to watch for it, and if it shows up, they have to stop what they're doing. So no harm to the environment. Liquidated damages is limited to, so they're talking about subdivision. That means they're talking about brand new homes. So when somebody buys a brand new home, they're going to put down a deposit, okay? The liquidated damages are limited to the amount of the deposit. The reason I'm so specific on that is when you guys are doing resales, which are homes that have already been lived in by somebody else, when you're doing resales, the deposit's different. It's usually 3%. And usually if they fall out of escrow, they can lose that whole 3%. Don't freak out about it though, because I've never seen, well, I won't say never. I have seen one seller lose their deposit. And that was, and it wasn't on our side. We had the sellers, and the buyers were all the way up to the very end. They released all their contingencies, and they didn't understand something. It was horse property, and their agent didn't explain it to them, and they fell out of escrow and they lost their deposit, and it was 15 grand. But for the most part, if you're representing the buyer, you guys be really careful with them. I hate to tell the story, but I'm going to tell it anyways because it's pretty important. It's a new one. This just happened. So what happens is every year, CAR and your association has meetings. Most of the meetings, we have 3 meetings a year on CAR, and our association has them once a month. So we were just at a meeting, and I was really surprised. And this is kind of the environment that you guys need to know this. Basically what happened is the buyer, he's like, can I put, with this environment, you're doing bidding wars. Like you're putting in offers at multiple places. And a lot of times your buyers will say, well, I like these 2 properties, those other 4 or 5 I don't like, but can we put offers in on both of them? Well, yeah, you can, but you have to disclose it to the seller. And what happened was this real estate agent representing the buyer said, yeah, we can put offers on more than one property. And they did. And they got accepted by both. And they had deposit on the first one they got accepted on. They had a $73,000 deposit, and they put it down on the property, and then they decided they liked this other property more. Well, it was only within 3 or 4 days, so they didn't. It wasn't. We did a home inspection and we don't like your house. It wasn't. The appraisal didn't come in and we didn't like your house. Those things you can cancel out on and get your deposit back. But if you just put money into escrow and you don't disclose to the seller that you put money on another one, because the seller could have picked somebody else, but they picked you because you were ready to go. Well, within 3 or 4 days, the buyer decided they wanted the other house, so they canceled escrow. And the seller said, that wasn't good faith. I'm not going to give you back your $73,000. I'm going to keep it. And they went back to them, and they went through a whole lawsuit. And it ended up costing the buyer $30,000 to get his $73,000 back that he did not get. He lost. The seller got all the money, because the buyer's agent did not disclose to the seller that they had multiple properties they were putting offers in on. And the buyer's agent, literally the attorney said that the buyer's agent said, don't worry about it, we'll just go ahead and cancel. So who do you think is going to, in the end, get sued? Probably that real estate agent. And if the real estate agent gets sued, so does the broker. So be careful with what you do and make sure you know what you're doing. And you guys, when you're brand new, your broker should be walking you through every deal. Like when you write an offer, they should be reviewing it. When you do a listing, they should be reviewing it. That's what they're there for. Condominiums. Undivided interest in common, separate interest in airspace. That's a long one, huh? Everybody got it? I have a couple people still writing. I'll give them a second. So you do have interest in the airspace. They're talking about the airspace over like the tennis courts or the swimming pool or whatever. Okay, when you own a condominium, what happens is you own the airspace in your unit, okay? If you're in a co-op, so a co-op is you own a percentage of the whole complex. We don't have a lot of co-ops in California, but we do have some, so be aware when you're looking at property, what kind of property it is, like I said earlier. Owners of condos, PUDs, and co-ops. Common interest in airspace above all common areas. Common interest in airspace above common areas. Are you guys learning a bunch of stuff? Is that cool? And you know what's cool about this job? You never know what's going to happen when you wake up in the morning. It's crazy stuff. Always be ready. One of the things, so when you have your real estate license, you can do a lot of different types of work. Like I said, I did almost everything you could try to do with a real estate license. And one of the places that was the best training ever, from 8 to 5 for 6 weeks. A little place called Forest Lawn. So you could sell cemetery lots. I brought that up because of the airspace. We'll figure it out. I'll tell you when I don't know. I looked at something that I was going to tell you guys, but I'll figure it out. You know, when you get older, your brain just forgets stuff. It's crazy. Yes?
What's the difference between 73 and 74?
73 and 74. So 73 is undivided interest in common, separate interest in airspace, because you're going to have two different questions that are going to ask you. One of them will say that, and the other one will say common interest in airspace above the common area. So that's why you had to write the whole thing down. I wonder, is that my same overthinker? No?
You said yes.
I say yes. Don't be an overthinker. You're going to be like Adam. You're going to have to take it 3 times. And it'll mess up my percentages. Oh yeah, it's not about you. It's about your client. Seller provides buyers. So when you have a condominium, this is one that everybody has a problem with, and I don't understand it. And it goes into a long conversation. It's super easy. You sell something that's in an association. Who has to give the buyer the association paperwork? The seller. Okay, in the real world, no. Okay, so let me explain one more thing. Oh, sorry. In the real world of real estate, it's different than the test world. Okay, unfortunately, it's true. So sometimes we'll have people that are working as assistants in real estate offices, and they're like, no, and they sit there and they overthink. Well, this is what we do in the real world, and this is how we do it. No, it doesn't matter what you do in the real world. It matters about the test world. Okay. So in the real world, when you open escrow, because we just went through this whole conversation with one of my new agents, she's doing a condominium thing, and we went through this whole conversation with her buyer. Her buyer's like, well, I live in the complex. I have the Ccnrs. I'm like, is yours a complete set of Ccnrs? Like every time the association has a meeting, do you get the bylaws or the updates and then you put them in and take the old ones out? And she's like, well, no, but I really don't need them. I go, the law says. I always say that. My son says, do you always have to say that? The law says the seller has to provide the buyer with the Ccnrs, okay? But the seller is not going to say, here's my Ccnrs, here you go, because I don't know if they're updated. So in the real world, what's going to happen is you're going to go into escrow. Escrow will contact the property management company, and the property management company will give escrow the bylaws and the Ccnrs, who will give it to the buyer. So in reality, escrow is going to give it to the buyer because they're going to order it from the seller's property management company. But on the test, the seller has to give it to the buyer, period. Okay?
What's
So
the
if you're-
CNR?
Ccnrs, we're going to go over those right now. Ccnrs are covenants, conveyances, and restrictions. Covenants, conveyances, and restrictions. It's the rules of the community. What you can and can't do. Like you can't park overnight. In my association in Irvine, you can't park on the street. You have to park in your driveway. So if you don't have enough garages and driveway space, you better not have another car. All right, infill developer, environmental issues. Build on underutilized lots in populated areas. We'll take a break when we get to a good stopping point. And the restrooms are out there to the left if you don't know already. Infill developer builds on underutilized lots in populated areas. Smart growth. Ooh, that's one of my favorite ones. Bless you. Bless you, bless you, bless you. I know, I always have 3 at a time. Smart growth is ecology friendly. Everybody got it? That's an easy one. Brownfield Economic Development Initiative. That's a long one, huh? Redevelop contaminated properties, a HUD program. After you write it, I'm going to have you circle some stuff, so keep writing. That's like iced coffee. but at least it's coffee. So what I want you to do with the Brownfield economic development, think about brown, think about poop, think about contaminated. How about that? That's what I think, brown, contaminated poop. However, what I want you to circle is I want you to circle the contaminated, and I want you to circle HUD program. I think this is an answer that's all of the above, and contaminated is going to be like C, HUD's going to be another letter, and there's a year, so when we're going through the questions and answers, we'll add the year. I think it's 1979, but don't write it yet. Brownfield Economic Development Initiatives. EPA Superfund sites. That reminds me of Superwoman. Superwoman, super lawyer. You know that commercial? There's a billboard with her picture on it. Clean up toxic waste, collection of statutes, establish liability. When you're all done with that, circle toxic waste and circle establish liability, because you're gonna see those. It'll pop out like a sore thumb. Next one. Anything you guys miss, if you need to get it, just let me know later, like on break or something. Special categories of land use. Timeshares, timeshare interests, resort developments, and housing for the elderly. That cracks me up, the housing for the elderly, because it's 55 plus. How elderly is 55 now?
Yeah,
Don't even start me. I must be whoa elderly.
I'll be there 3 years.
I'm gonna need a cane pretty soon. So like if you don't like doing normal real estate and you want to do timeshares, people that work for like Marriott and Disney, they make like 250 grand a year. That's not bad money. And they bring you the clients. And not only do they bring you the clients, those are good connections, right? If they can buy a timeshare, they probably can buy another house. Just thinking. Timeshares, resort developments, housing for the elderly. Water rights. So there's water underneath that land. I think we're getting close to questions and answers. Before we do the questions and answers, we'll take a 10-minute break. Water's beneath the surface. So if it's not in a defined channel, it's percolating waters. So I know it's kind of crazy because some of you guys are really young, but they still have them. They're called percolators. When you make coffee in the big container and the water's jumping up and down and you see it, so it's percolating. That's because it's not in a defined channel. Percolating waters. Pump and use underground water. Well, just because the water's under your property, can you just pump it out and use it as you want? It's called overlying rights. If you have overlying rights, you can pump it out and use it. You can if you have the overlying rights.
So that would be like in farms, right?
Yeah, that'd be like Northern California. I had a listing up there, and God, what was that? It was Carmel. They have some.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the lady didn't even know she had it. I'm like, do you know that you have a well like over there? It's funny, you guys. A lot of times owners don't even know that they have stuff. It's crazy. Do you have a question?
No, I was gonna say my house in the Bay
Really?
Area. Yeah,
Wait, where is it?
At the Bay Area.
Oh, cool. Nice. Do you live up there?
No, I live in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
I used to live.
Cool.
My mom lives.
I love Northern California. It's kind of like a little gold mine people don't know about. It's less expensive than here. I mean, what do we got? The Angel Stadium, the beach. Great weather.
That's where the serial killers go.
Northern California.
Yeah.
I have a really mean dog. His name is Willie. You don't want to mess with that dog. He wanted to eat my pool guy this morning.
Oh. I'm supposed to know him already, right?
No, the pool's just now being built. It's almost done. So on my YouTube page, you know where that says notification? If people are notified on there, I'm gonna have a big ass pool party. I'm inviting all my students because they've been living through the last 4 months of this. Water rights, moving water course like a river. Riparian owner. So on the test it says water course. So water that moves from one location to another location, like a river, is riparian owner. So if you have a house that has a river going by it at the edge of it, what I want you to do after you write riparian is circle the R-I in riparian and the R-I in river. Water with a shoreline, like a lake. So the water's not going anywhere. It's sitting stagnant. It's a lake or a pond. It's not going anywhere, so it's littoral. After you write littoral owner, I want you to circle the L in lake and the L in littoral. And that'll be really easy to remember. Don't you love the short ones? Short, easy, right, fast. So some people ask me about flashcards, and it's cute. We used to have this one instructor that sold the flashcards for like 20 bucks. And it's like, what you have to understand is it's not purchasing the flashcards that's gonna make you pass. Hi, I bought the flashcards, I'm gonna pass. It's the process of making them. So if you wanna make flashcards, if you really think that if you're having a hard time remembering these things, like I said, it takes 3 times of writing it down. So what some people do is they'll buy those index cards, and on one side you would write what we have on the wall or what's already in the book, and on the other side you could flip it over and write what you're writing in, and then you would remember the things that you need to remember. Taking water from a public stream. Is that appropriate? Can you just like go up to any public stream and like take one of your little drink things and fill it up for yourself? It's called appropriation. When a person takes water from a public stream, this is called appropriation. One of my favorite ones coming up. Water safe for drinking. It's called, you guys know it?
Potable.
Well, I guess you could say potable. I always say potable.
Oh, that's me.
Do you have an accent from somewhere?
Rhode Island. Yeah.
I'm like, where are you from?
Yeah,
God, I really get far. I was raised and born all the way around here, Whittier, and then Cal State Fullerton. Well, my boss who teaches this class, he talks about there was like a 10K run, and he saw a truck going by that said potable, and he's like, potable water? What is that? He goes, is it for the potty? I don't know. And then he's like, and then when he saw it, he's like, oh, it's drinking water. So potable water is drinking water. I don't know how that makes you remember. How I remember it. Are you ready? I told you about Willie, right? Willie's a really cool dog. So I'm gonna clone him. So sometimes this is gonna make you remember the potable. I know you guys have animals, and some of your animals do what my animal does. And there's a downstairs restroom, and it's always clean and flushed. And Willie just struts in the house and starts drinking the potty water. Potable water, drinking. That's it. Got it? Oh, look at questions and answers. So it is now 10:37. In 10 minutes, we're going to start again. That really kind of makes it 10:47. So let's just come back at 10:50. So at 10:50, we're starting up again. Be ready to go.
How long do we